Hi, today I wanted to talk about the definition of a polyglot. It's a pretty common question that a lot of people have, that I had when I started learning languages. Um, so, according to Google, a polyglot is someone who knows or can use multiple languages, and often the discrepancy lies in the number that qualifies you as a polyglot. So I've seen some definitions where someone who knows 4 languages is a polyglot, or someone who knows 6 or 8 or 10. And then there's also this distinction between a polyglot and a hyperpolyglot. A hyperpolyglot being someone who knows, maybe 10, 8, 10, 15 languages. But in this video, I don't really want to talk about that sort of definition where I'm arguing what number qualifies you as a polyglot or not. I wanted to talk about a definition that I heard in a presentation given by Professor Alexander Arguelles in a language conference. I'll post the link below. Oh, and also, if you want to see this video in Spanish or French, the annotations will be to the side there. So, according to his definition of a polyglot is someone who has mastered the art of language learning. Someone who has mastered the science, the method of language learning. So, what does this imply? This implies that there's a certain method that works better than other methods when learning a language, and this is true. And kind of an informal proof, say, is by comparing some of these well-known polyglots on YouTube, even like Richard Simcott or Moses or Luca or even the professor himself. If you compare them to high school students or students who have taken language courses, students who have studied languages in high school or college in the United States. Well, I shouldn't say college because I haven't experienced that yet, but I can say safely that there's a stark difference between the results of people like the polyglots that I mentioned before and high school students who have taken high school level classes in languages. So what does this mean? This means that those people have developed some sort of way of, they've sort of cracked the code of language learning. And according to the professor, these people are polyglots. Now, what's the difference between this definition and Google's definition? Well, clearly, the main difference is that someone who is multilingual isn't necessarily a polyglot. What do I mean by multilingual? Someone that is someone who grew up in a multilingual environment and learned other languages through immersion or just by being in an environment where multiple languages were spoken. For example, I'm born into a Tamil family, so I learned Tamil not actively like I've learned languages like Spanish or French, but I was immersed in an environment where I absorbed that language. So the knowledge, the way I learned Spanish and French is completely different from the way I learned Tamil. Similarly, you have kids in countries like, I can use India for an example. Kids in India grow up, they go to school, and if you don't know, India has different languages for each state, so each state has a different language. A lot of people think they're different dialects, but actually they're completely different languages. So, for example, if there's a child who lives in the south somewhere in one state, so they will know the state language, they will know Hindi, which is the national language if they go to school, they'll also learn English if they go to school, and if their family happens to be from another state, they'll know that language too. So that's 4 languages right there. But how many of those were actually learned? Well, English was not really learned because kids in India, and when I say kids in India, in this case I'm referring to kids who go to school, who have who live in sort of a modern area where there's school, there's television, there's exposure to literature and books and things like that. So when I say English wasn't learned, it wasn't learned actively because they were already exposed to it. So English wasn't learned actively. The family language probably wasn't learned actively because it was the same way that I learned Thumber, because that's what they speak at home. For example, in my home, we speak Thumber and English at home. So both of those languages I didn't have to study to learn. Also, when I say learn actively, that's what I mean, that I had to study, that you have to study to learn them. So English and their familial language. And then the other languages, the state language and Hindi, those are also very much absorbed, So in the end, those kids, although they study things like English and Hindi in school, those are just to refine their skills. But in the end, they haven't actually, gone through the process of learning the language. So if you were to ask them to go and learn some other language, I'm sure they'd have a lot of difficulty. So that proves that they're not really polyglots and that they haven't mastered the art of learning a language. They just happen to be proficient in many languages through other means. Now, this raises an interesting question. Can a person who's multilingual become a polyglot? Of course, and there are many ways that this can happen. One is, for example, say that I am born into a French family and I live in France, and all I speak is French, and I probably speak a little English, and then I decide that I want to go and learn Spanish. Well, this is going to be a lot easier for me since I'm French than for someone who maybe is Chinese and is living in China and only speaks Mandarin and maybe has a little bit of exposure to English. Why? Because obviously both French and Spanish are Romance languages, and there are many cognates in between the two. The grammar is very similar. So obviously, being multilingual in that sense, or being having knowledge of French will definitely help you acquire other similar languages like Spanish or Italian or Portuguese. So the point that I wanted to make there was that being multilingual doesn't mean that you're a polyglot, but of course, being multilingual gives you an advantage maybe over other people in learning one or other languages in a certain group. So in conclusion, I just want to say that I really like the professor's definition of a polyglot much more than the generic someone who can speak X languages, because it distinguishes the academic aspect of language learning from the natural immersion, that way of learning, which really doesn't take much effort. It's more by chance or luck. So that's all I have to say, and thank you for watching.